Hey everybody, back with more Dungeons and Dialectics. I'm here with Victor. What are we talking about today, man?
Well, today we are talking about, well, basically a pair of terms that I feel is very often misused, and we need to define them further to be able to effectively use them and understand what is it that relates to them that makes them so contentious, I guess is the word for it. Now, the two terms are optimization and power gaming, or well, to optimize or to power game. And the as I said, these are often used interchangeably. People don't really think about which one means what a lot of the time. Now, to specify, optimize by its definition is to make the best or most effective use of, and we can put parentheses on the word best there because that's a very contextual and relative. Whilst power gaming, at least according to its Wikipedia page, is playing with the aim of maximizing progress towards a specific goal to the exclusion of other considerations such as storytelling, atmosphere, and camaraderie.
Yeah, I think those are fair enough. The problem that we're going to get with any of these terms is that this is not a clinical field. There's not like heavy
Yeah.
study to it, and from what I see, these are simply two flags on a gradient line. There's no clear distinction of what the line between the two, or where either of these two begin or end on that same line.
Yes, yes, but we need to have these established from the start, so at least so that our argumentation makes sense from those
Yeah.
starting points.
Unless I'm mistaken, the best way to sum up the difference of it would, for me, the way what I'm hearing from those definition is that optimization is the act that has no negative or positive connotation to it. Power gaming is optimization with a negative connotation, seeing that it does it to the exclusion of other factors. Is that wrong to say?
Well, I put it in a bit of a more I'll just say it. My definition of the difference between them is that optimization does not intrude on soft values while power gaming does. And soft value views and hard skills are, well, soft skills and hard skills, or soft values and hard values. Hard values are things like, can you put together a character sheet and follow the rules?
Yeah.
That
No.
is that mechanically exists, while soft skills are things like social interaction, communication, leadership, teamwork, all of these factors that are very much more hard to quantify.
Yeah. No, I do like that. That is basically just a lack of infringement on these soft values. Um, okay, so I don't think we're ever going to get a perfect one that's going to be happy for everybody, but at least for the sake of this conversation, I believe that we have our parameters for this discussion, so that anybody watching this, I know that you will probably have your own interpretation of what those are, and maybe we'll, if it's strong enough and something that we like to think about and mull over our heads over time, we'll come back at it with the way that you're looking at it. But for right now, these are our parameters. We have to put this conversation in a box, or it will have no end, really, because we can just laterally step until we're exhausted.
Yeah.
So I'm basically going to be taking the stance in this conversation of probably wildly extreme compared to what a lot of other people are going to like. My position is that optimization and power gaming both are useless endeavors and are nothing more than masturbation, because it is only to satiate your need to get these mathematical bonuses, but does nothing for the table as a whole. Very flame, a lot of flame in there, a lot of explosions in what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
We need opposite standpoints to be able to
Yeah,
negotiate them later. So
but I will go into my position. I have roughly 5 points of why I have that. So we'll see where that goes, and hopefully you don't click off just because I said my my hypothetical, or rather my hypothesis. What's your position?
my position is essentially that optimization is, so long as it's not put in the wrong context, it's not optimization is not a problem. Power gaming is.
Cool. I think that is probably a moderate position that I think most people would probably hold. I would venture a guess. So I think yours is the
Yes.
most correct, but let's,
Yeah. Well, a more neutral stance,
yeah,
but much as much as it might help a more diametric discussion, I find it very hard to take a strong stance in that other direction as well.
yeah,
And I've had a bit of a back and forth history with with the concepts of optimization and power gaming, because for the longest time, at least in the context of D&D, I did not in any way think of myself as such. I thought maybe I have a little bit. I like to tweak the numbers a bit, see if I can get some more out of this. But
yeah.
yeah, you helped me understand that actually I am a bit of an optimizer, and
And by the
I've
way,
come to
I
terms with that.
I love playing with you. So
Yeah, that too.
just because a player has something that you would consider like a skill flaw or a value flaw does not mean, I mean, we're still friends. We play. I mean, recently we haven't
Yeah.
been playing as much, but that's just because weird schedule and all
Yeah,
that.
that's because of other factors, not out of a lack of want.
Yeah, but I've been having a lot. I've always had a lot of fun with you, and so I don't know. I guess my point is that just because somebody does not like optimization and somebody is an optimizer does not mean they can't have a good time as long as they're willing to communicate. And I think you and I have a lot of communication, if it's not obvious by the YouTube uploads.
Yeah,
We have a lot of communication, so we can make the flaws that we see in one another work for one another, and it makes our game better because it forces us to play better.
Yes, yes.
But so I guess another thing that we have to kind of caveat to this is that finding where somebody falls into the optimization power gaming spectrum, or whether or not they even fall on that line, is extraordinarily subjective, because it really comes down to your own perception of like how much is that. Somebody might consider that, well, how can you be an optimizer if your stat isn't 20 yet? And then somebody else could be like, well, asking for an advantage is power gaming.
Yeah.
So it's super subjective, and we're not here to debate where we fall into these lines. We're just talking about the nebulous merits and negatives of these positions, not that you're wrong for thinking people aren't optimizers or whatever
Yeah,
it is
like,
for you.
yeah. As I stated, I never thought of myself as an optimizer in the context of D&D before it was explained to me, and that what I was doing was actually in that field. And I mean, can be plenty of people who are just as me. They don't really have that understand themselves as such. And one of the reasons why, I don't know if I should say that I get away with it, but I should say that one of the reasons why I find that I make it work is because when I try to make something optimal, I don't try to just take I don't try to take any form of like generic concept, and I don't try to pour everything into one particular stat or one single goal, like most number of attacks or largest dice or something like that. I want to do something interesting or exotic with it. And like so exotic is of course also very relative depending on your the kind of games you go, but most people wouldn't necessarily say that a mountain dwarf warlock is an optimized concept.
But it felt optimized.
Yeah, but I took it and I made it as optimal as possible, with some mercy on your side in regards to whether you could cast with both hands full or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I say let's get right into this. Do you have any first point, or do you want me to take first point?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. I find that the biggest strength in tabletop role-playing games, and from here on out I'll probably try to refer to D&D because that's our main subject, the biggest strength in it, and why that it's having a renaissance right now compared to all of the other mediums that we have for entertainment, such as video games, books, movies, comics, all these individuals, the one thing that it has going for it is that it's flexibility and options of engagement. So what I mean by that is that a programmer making a video game, while mechanically it is almost inarguable for me to say that video games are better on a mechanical standpoint. They can do more calculations, they can deal with more things simultaneously. To say that on a mechanical standpoint, video games aren't better, I think is disingenuous. So it's not the mechanical aspects of role playing games and D&D that we're falling in love with. It's flexibility. So specifically, a game is limited by its programmer's creativity and dealing with the situation. When you walk into, you might have a dialogue tree, you might have 3 branching paths, but that's it. If the player comes up with something that the mechanics do not allow for change in, then it can't be done. Whereas in D&D's strength, you can do anything within your creative ability. You have an adjudicator there who's there to help you do anything within the situation. So to kind of wrap this back around to what we're talking about, I think having a mechanical focus when you're playing this is subverting what the actual strength of the hobby is. I do not consider, for me personally, D&D to be a lifestyle game. And the way that I usually term lifestyle games and define them is that it's the game that you play almost exclusively. So like some people only play Magic the Gathering. Some people only play World of Warcraft. And there are some people that play Dungeons and Dragons as a lifestyle game. And so that's where you kind of get that optimization power gaming, because they have that need to kind of bite down on stronger numbers, and they want that crunch, they want that tactical sense. But I would posit that that is not a strong basis, because there's a very low upper limit to what D&D can handle on those senses. We're talking about +1s, +2s. We're talking about 5-foot squares. There's just not a lot there. And even if you take a more complex system, Pathfinder or Shadowrun, these systems are still limited by your ability to communicate them on the table, either through words or diagrams. So it's very slow and cumbersome. So your enjoyment and your satisfaction level is at a low ceiling. So what really your effort should be focused on is the other areas of, narrative choice, making interesting characters, moral issues, anything that comes from the narrative. That should be your focus. So for me personally, the way I deal with this is that I play other games. So if I want high tactical use, I play war games, tabletop miniature war games. I play board games. I play video games that are, tactics, strategy based. So that's why I don't feel this hankering to do so.
All right. A fair point indeed. The point I will make, however, is that we need to understand, for one, we need to contextualize. If you are playing in a game with high lethality and a GM that is... Well, basically, if you're playing in a game with high lethality and the expectation is that you will face very harsh challenges and the DM will not pull any punches. If you die, you die. In those contexts, optimization is absolutely not only encouraged, but very much needed to make progress. If you are in a more neutral scenario where that is not necessarily the case, absolutely. I love me some good RP, and I love me some good. I love to get the soft values and enhance the teamwork and all that stuff. But at the same time, when I want to make a character, I want to have a sense that they are capable and that they are. And when I say capable, I don't necessarily just mean that this hangs very much onto what is the general level of power from an average person, a soldier, and a player in order. And when I play, I want to have a sense that my character, even if he might not at level 1 be a big player in the world, I want to be able to feel that he is at least on par or above the average village guard in terms of where the average character's strength is. And it's hard to establish that ahead of time, so it's more it feels more soothing to be able to tell that I've gotten what I can out of these numbers.
Yeah, that's So yeah, obviously this is going to be a gradient because again, the optimization standpoint really relies on not only the session, but the type of campaign that's going on and your other players. And I think a really good benchmark on whether or not you're quote unquote spending too much time on optimization is uh, comparing that between other party members. So if your character is just flat, uh, instead of giving numbers, we'll go a little lighter on it. The If a character in your party, or like a majority of your party, has functions that they are focused on, so one's very focused on investigation, another one's very focused on athletics, all these things, and they have not just focused on optimization, they've basically just followed the criteria of making the character and now are playing. Just, 5 minutes, boom, level up takes about a minute, boom, they just go and do it. Um, if their focused stat or skill or whatever they're using are, if your skill is comparable to them and it's not your primary, uh, this causes a problem for your party. And this is like the downside to optimization in power gaming.
Niche protection.
Exactly. Niche protection is very important. And if your again, it's always comparative at your table, not from different tables, but for your table, it creates an almost metagame problem, which we'll talk about metagame in another conversation. But that player is going to feel deflated because they might know that statistically you're as good or better at something. And everybody at the table will be kind of like, well, why don't we just use the person who's optimized and done all this instead? And it's like, well, we want somebody to participate. So the
Yeah,
whole
why didn't Gandalf just call down the eagles and they flew to the Mount Doom? Well, there wouldn't be a story then.
Yeah, so you have this weird problem that it's because the optimizer was like, well, this feat gave me bonuses across the board, this multi-class gave me all these bumps, so really I'm actually the best one at everything right now. And again, it's compared to the rest of the party. So one of the points is that I would say is that unbalance is not something that I'm terribly worried about as a DM when it comes to like my stuff, because I can always make stronger stuff. I can always put more stuff. But when it comes to the rest of the party, one or two people in the party that are optimizing can really marginalize other people at the table and ruin fun for everybody, to include yourself, because you feel like you feel frustrated because, well, they're not optimizing, they're not doing what they should be, they're not as good as me, why do I have to do it? It's just, it creates a whole problem. You have to have a through line from the party, kind of like almost like a tethering of where everybody's going to be at roughly, and the DM has to work on that and massage those edges.
Yeah, and this is where we start straying towards power gaming and away from the purely optimization, because, and you've probably seen this in me, whenever I see something that I think a player logically should do and they aren't, I do everything in my power not to tell them what to do. What I try to do is make them aware of an ability they might not be thinking about. But I am also very uncertain. Am I stepping into power gaming territory here many times when I do that? But I see what you mean when you say that there is the sense of frustration, because even if you do say, then you've certainly started power gaming and you're telling people what to do and you're ruining the mood at the table, or you're not telling but you're sitting there being like what they should but I shouldn't, and there's this internal debate going on inside you at all kinds of times. But
not to mention, everybody at the table might know who has the best stats in this situation, so it's just kind of like, I guess we'll have you roll and you might suck, but whatever.
Yeah, but there's also again, as part of the whole niche protection thing, if there's a scenario where you tell someone where one specific character does something or notices something and you tell them to roll, and someone else at the table is like, I also want to roll, that is when you're starting to step into power gaming, because the GM didn't tell you.
Yeah,
but you feel like, I have good stats, can I roll? I want to roll. And that's starting to step onto toes that you might not even have seen were there.
Yeah, that's always a big issue too.
Yeah, when you just had the instinctive urge of, oh, I have big numbers for this.
Yeah, I think one of the most critical points that I can put forward is that no matter how many optimizers you have, or even if they venture into power gaming, this the DM has to challenge you. There is no question in this. You cannot just win just because you have a +7 at first level. That doesn't mean it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna roll over every challenge, right? Like the DM has to do something to challenge you. So at that point, you are effectively, for a system that a lot of people already complain about, the CR system and creating encounters in 5e. I hear massive complaints from people saying like, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's like, well, all of those tools that could have possibly worked here and there are now thrown completely out the window, and DMs now have to add more, add stronger foes, give pluses all here. The DM is nigh in, omnipotent and omnipresent. They have no, you can't beat them. They are not restrained by the rules that you are as a player character. So they have to challenge you. So all your pluses, all that does is create, I put random numbers to it, an extra 10 minutes of work, an extra hour of work when the DM is writing to create these encounters to challenge you. You have effectively done nothing other than create work for somebody else who's trying to hopefully enrich your storytelling. And this is even further exacerbated if you're the only optimizer or power gamer in the group and all the other players don't have that. So now the DM has to figure out ways to deal with you without completely and utterly destroying the rest of the party members. And it just creates this snowball of more and more and more problems.
Yeah, I would argue that you can I don't know if you can completely solve the issue, but you can certainly alleviate it a lot by when as a power gamer, or not power gamer, as an optimizer, terms again, if you are sitting there as an optimizer and you're making a character for a game and you realize that the others aren't optimizers, figure out what their classes and characters, what they are good at, what you think they're going to be doing, and make sure that you only optimize towards something no one else is great as. If you're playing a monk and you have a rogue in the party, don't make a stealth focus, for example,
or
because that's their thing.
Don't make it a secondary or tertiary thing that you're just happen to be as good or better than them just because you optimize the hell out of it.
Yeah, make a focus in that aspect. And then there's also things of, there's one thing when you create a character, but there's also how do you play the character. If we go back to Bradox again, my dwarf warlock, he at one point, because of his because of some good stats, managed to roll a history check and realize that he knew exactly what he had in front of him, which was a gelatinous cube. But he was so busy with the fact that he knew exactly what this was and telling the rest of the party that he didn't step away from it and got sucked up into it.
Mm-hmm.
That is not power gaming.
Yeah.
That is technically not even optimization, but it was a way to use high numbers but add character to it.
Yeah.
What do the numbers actually mean?
Yeah. Optimization itself, I don't think has any negative or positive connotation. I think it's just a tool that can be used either way. My ultimate problem with it, just in a nutshell, is that if you are optimizing beyond kind of the norm, obviously ranges, but if you're optimizing beyond the norm, all it's doing is creating work. It may make you feel better because you're like, look at all my 6 stats, but ultimately, if you're in it for the story and not just that, that +8 that you have, you're just taking attention away from that, where the DM could possibly be writing for story, but has to spend an extra 30 minutes to an hour upping encounters to deal with your pluses.
And even in a scenario where every player at the table is an optimizer, there is still a challenge to the GM. It may be a less of a challenge in terms of spotlight and making sure every niche has its time in the sunlight and the spotlight. But there is of course also the question of how many numbers can we add before it just isn't manageable or makes sense or doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. And I don't make a habit of trying to curtail commentary for this, but I often hear. Obviously, you haven't leveled it at me, but often when I speak on optimization and how it's ultimately not, likely will not create good situations. Will actually probably create neutral or bad situations for the most part. Inevitably, someone will say, "Well, then why not just roll terrible stats, have -4 and everything?" I say that's literally the exact same problem, but on the other side of the coin. Like
Yeah.
you're creating more problems because your numbers are off of the range that is to be expected. So you're creating more work again. So it's to me it's a moot argumentative point.
Yes, that is the exact reason why I chose not to make
Mm-hmm.
that argument, because the martyr that thinks that they're somehow being great by not at least doing things in a usable manner is at least as impractical as the optimizer or the power gamer who doesn't take concern for the rest of the party in the other direction.
Yep. Do you have any further points that you want to put out?
Uh, let's see. Well, there there is of course also the factor of how much ego or involvement or attachment you have to characters as well for this kind of stuff. There are the people who who arrive for to a group in a scenario, and there's a whole new group, and one player arrives and says, "Here's my character," and the others haven't even started writing anything on their sheet yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, for one, that treads into power gaming territory already, because if this is a group effort, a group activity, and we should be putting things together,
Yeah.
because, as mentioned, you need to figure out if you need to think about what your niche is, and whether it treads on anyone else's niche. It may, if you have more players that are good at several players that are good at a specific area, make sure that you are complementing each other rather than competing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's always worth asking yourself if you realize that you are an optimizer, that at what point am I stepping into power gaming, and at what point does higher numbers not matter?
Yeah.
It's you contextualize and problematize.
Yeah, it's ultimately a skill that comes down to you have to build up your knowledge of, in combination of sharing spotlight, in not being a general drag on situations and encounters. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to roll the d20. And unless you just have that kind of table, which I've never actually seen before. I think it's kind of a straw man, but unless you have the table that's just like, okay, well, because you have a +11, you pass anyways, so no need to roll. You're going to be rolling anyways. So my suggestion is, everything in moderation. Optimization to a very small degree. Pick this over this because it's actually useful and beneficial and makes your character more interesting. But at the same time, you need to probably send more focus into why it's interesting for your character. Why have they made this choice? Why is this something that they do? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, people are going to remember and tell the story about the situation that happened. Wow, that was pretty crazy that we got stuck over that boiling pit of mud swinging from chains. Not, wasn't it awesome when my +11 got us out of this situation with my athletics? That's usually not going to be the point, but how you play it and how you describe it. Often failures can be described with so well that those become stories as well. So it's really how we describe it and we play it that matter, not necessarily our bonuses, because the DM is always there, should be always twisting dials to make sure that it is a interesting, intense encounter. So your numbers don't matter that much at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, the numbers are there to represent something rather than to be something, and we need to figure out what that represents rather than focusing on the exact quantity. And don't be the guy who asks the Asimar player why they picked the light warlock when both of them get radiance resistance, because so many enemies could cause radiant damage. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think a point that we haven't mentioned yet, but optimization and power gaming tend to create like a creative blockage. Um, can't tell you how many half elf paladins, warlocks, and sorcerers I've seen, and it's so common that I'll take a dwarf once in a while, or an orc or something.
Yeah, and that is the thing. I start by trying to think of a novel combination of class and race, and then make something out of it that I try to trim to a good level. Don't think that every single thing has to be optimized, unless that is what your GM and the rest of your party expects of you.
It is very surprising how much that little +2 in a stat will weigh on people at the end of the day. It's like, oh, +2 in my main casting stat. I can't pick anything else but that. There's no reason. It's like, I mean, we have ABIs for a reason, dog. Like, it's like
when I was making my Warforged that I have started playing now, I was considering Barbarian at first, but the Barbarian's armor system and the Warforged armor system do not mix. And it doesn't necessarily officially say so, but it's two different armor calculations, and you can't put them together.
Yeah, player's handbook. You only use one armor calculation. So
yeah, exactly. And in the end, I didn't pick the Barbarian, and I felt more satisfied with that. And that is not necessarily bad. That is just the way I function. I see two things that don't work together, and I say, okay, I'll try something else maybe.
Yeah. I guess to close it out, don't let this conversation about optimization scare you away from making choices that are interesting to you. But hopefully, at least for my point, I've painted to you that maybe optimization at every turn is not the best use of your efforts. That if maybe the person that scours and the internet finding the best builds and the multi-classing stuff, you're probably not listening to this channel anyways. But
I want to retch at the very word build, because it feels it's so numbers. It's nothing else matters at that point. It's just numbers.
It's a popular concept, man. People
know.
People love it. But maybe we just put a little bit more effort in the why. And I know there's going to be people out there that says, well, I can role play and I can optimize. And I say, okay, we just got to get you away from the optimization, and then you'll be a good player. No, I jest.
Or put you in the right context.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a party and a GM that wants that out of you.
Yeah. Jokes aside, just have fun. Maybe open up your mind a little bit, but at the end of the day, if your table's having fun making crazy builds that rock house, and you guys are all having uproarious laughter during the entire session and having a great time, then who the fuck am I, right?
Yeah, we're merely analyzing deeper. You don't have to, but it might be worth doing it just to have a clearer idea of what you're dealing with.
All right. And with that, I hope you guys have good games ahead of you, and we'll see you on the next one.